that jobs report that was released is not looking good. Not looking good. In fact, it looked so badly that Donald Trump decided to remove the Bureau of Labor commissioner because he didn't like the numbers and the way that they turned out. Now, one thing I want to remind you of that we covered this last year as well. When when that final job report was released, CNN had to backtrack their own statement and say that the numbers that Biden had presented were incorrect. So in other words, they had fudged the numbers. I've been trying to tell people for years that economically, we are not doing well. And in particular, something recently that has happened with Black women, there are now over 300,000 Black women that are now unemployed, that have lost their jobs. I warned you that this was coming, especially when they announced that they were going to, cut those federal jobs. But he did release the labor commissioner. Let's get into all of this, folks.
President Trump defending his decision to fire the Bureau of Labor Statistics commissioner as we're standing by for him to announce a replacement. We also have new CNN reporting on what set him off, what happened behind the scenes before he ousted that top labor official, accusing her without evidence of rigging the job numbers. CNN's Elena Treen is at the White House now. She has this new reporting. What more have you learned? And Elena, what more are we hearing from the president just speaking moments ago?
Yeah, well, let me start with the second part of this, what President Trump is continuing to say this morning, because I'd remind you, this firing, of course, of the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics came Friday after that worse than expected jobs report, including some of the revisions down from previous months. And this morning, he's still talking about it, arguing it's, the system is rigged, that it's political, all things that he's and other officials as well continue to argue without any real evidence. And it comes, of course, as we know, that the president said that midweek this week, at some point in the next couple of days, he is expected to name her replacement. But I want you to listen to what he told CNBC just moments ago, Jessica.
It is antiquated, but it's also very political. And, I had an election recently where I did very well, won every swing state, won the popular vote, won everything. All right. Won. It's, I think 87% of the counties were Republican up. That's never happened before. And yet I had to go through hell. And just days before the election, they put out numbers that it was like the country was on fire. It was doing so well. And then they did a revision about 2 weeks later, and the revision was down by almost 900,000 jobs. You remember that? And I said, I said, what would have happened? What would have happened if I lost? Think of it. I would have said they gave phony numbers and then they revised them a week and a half later.
All right, Jessica, the reason I want you to listen to that is because it's so in line with the reporting that we have about what really led to this decision to oust Dr. Erica McIntyre, the head of BLS. So part of it is because, as you could tell, Trump was fixated on this even before he came into office. I remember covering him on the campaign trail, and he was often railing against the job reports, particularly the revisions, and saying that they didn't seem right, okay? And then what I was told in the lead up and what led to this decision on Friday was that even though he had brought up McIntyre's name before, given she is a Biden appointee, something the president does not like, he doesn't like having a Biden appointees in very high positions within his administration, he didn't really have any reason to try and axe her before Friday, because a lot of the jobs reports we saw in the first few months of this administration were actually very good. We saw the president and many other top officials here at the White House argue that the data in those jobs reports showed that the economy was doing well. But what really got under his skin, and this is what you're referring to about what set him off, what really got under his skin with that Friday jobs report was not necessarily the slowing of the economy and the adding of less jobs than they had anticipated. It was the revisions of the previous months that they had celebrated, May and June, that actually the number of jobs added was lower than they had previously said. This is what one White House official.
So I'll just add to this. I think this is what is interesting about this, right? So first of all, creating more jobs doesn't necessarily mean that people have those jobs. For example, if a company created, 40 jobs or whatever, that doesn't mean those positions are filled, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Two, I think what the trend is showing you is that since the pandemic, actually, we're going to go back to '08 still, because I still don't believe the economy fully ever recovered since the '08 housing crisis. I don't think we've ever gotten back to that point that we were before all of that went down. So that being said, we have been basically battling uphill. Like for years, it's been an issue. But then the pandemic hit. And as you can see, people have still been struggling since the pandemic. That's a big part of the problem. So you are seeing from Biden's administration and Trump's administration that economically, when it comes to the job market, people are still struggling. And I tried to tell people this under the Biden administration. I had a friend that was laid off and it took them 9 months to find a job. I know another person just got laid off about 2 months ago, said they've applied pretty much everywhere, still has not gotten a job. It's not as easy as people think. And for whatever reason, it seems like if you're laid off, it's even harder to find a job. So what we are seeing, and I've said this before, over time, the qualifications for some of these roles have increased. So whereas a role that maybe required 1 to 3 years of experience now is asking for 5, right? And then like maybe instead of 2 references, they want 3 to 4. Like things like that, they're making it more difficult for you to get those jobs. Also, what jobs are we talking about? I said this under Biden. Are we talking about full-time jobs with benefits? Or are we talking about temp jobs, contract jobs that don't have benefits? Are we talking about temp to perm? Because jobs is vague. So keep that in mind. People also need benefits. So people are less likely, if they can avoid it, they are less likely to take a job that doesn't offer any type of health insurance, any type of benefits. We'll go on a little bit more here, and then I'm going to show you that report about the Black women.
Told me, they said, quote, "That's what set him off. He saw the revisions and knew something was awry for it to be changed so drastically. And this isn't a first time thing, considering so many companies make decisions based off these numbers. It's an issue that needed to be fixed." And so, like I said, this was something he had kind of been thinking about previously, but Friday is what really came to make this decision. Now, I will say as well, we have some reporting that some officials here at the White House had tried to argue with Trump, sought to offer up explanations for why perhaps the economy was slowing down. But it was Sergio Gore, one of his personnel officials here in the White House, that was the one to remind him that Erica McIntyre was a Biden appointee. So that just gives you some insight into all of this. Now,
and now Erica is gone. Just like that, Erica is gone. Remember, I also told you that it was reported that they fudged the numbers under Biden. But here's something else. Like, you guys have got to pay attention to this. This cannot be ignored. Terrifying reasons. 300,000 Black women lost jobs in 2025. So this is a big story that we did try to warn people about. Over the past 3 months, nearly 300,000 Black women have been pushed out of the workforce, with 518,000 who never returned to the force after the pandemic. There it is again. Pandemic. I told you, right? So let's talk about the fact that some of these employees, they worked for businesses that either no longer exist because they couldn't stay in business during the pandemic. Maybe they were in the state that was locked down. So that impacted a lot of businesses, especially a lot of small businesses. I know here in Massachusetts in particular, the restaurant industry took a big hit during the pandemic if you were in a state that was under lockdown. So there were a lot of restaurants that have closed, et cetera. So you still have people that lost their jobs during the pandemic. So that's one part of the discussion. And then there is this part. Now, with federal layoffs, DEI rollbacks, and structural inequities at play, it's a quiet crisis that speaks volumes. When the budget gets tight, Black women are the first to go. This has always been the case, though. This isn't new. What is new is the federal layoffs. Now, as I told you guys before, a lot of the DEI mainly applied to white women, and we've gone over the data with that. But the federal layoffs, this is the one that I tried to give people a big warning about, because let me pull this up here. Sorry. I think it went too far. I don't know why it does that. I hate how they do this. Get rid of that. Okay. Because when we're talking about the federal jobs, I think what people have to remember, and my family, I can speak from experience about this, especially in that Maryland, Virginia, like DC, the DMV area, a lot of people work for the federal government. In fact, some of my friends, when they graduated undergrad, they got jobs in DC to work for the federal government. Now, some of them went to work for the VA, like there's so many different like departments you can work for there, but there were quite a few that went to work for Veteran Affairs in DC. And they took those jobs because those jobs were full time. It offers opportunity for promotion. And also you have full benefits. And when you're graduating from undergrad, yeah, you're going to need some benefits, especially you coming off of your parents' like insurance. You're going to need to take care of yourself. Also, a lot of those jobs, Black people have those jobs. Those federal jobs that came in when Black people weren't able to get jobs, let's say with the state or with the city, the federal government swooped in to say, okay, well, we will offer jobs to help, the Black families. And what happened is that Black people that got those federal jobs, because it had full-time benefits, because you knew that you could get promoted because they have different grading scales. Like, so you can have like a job that's like a G1 or GS1 or whatever, and then you just kind of work your way up. Like, it's not like what the rest of us had to deal with outside of the federal government, where number one, in higher ed, like we didn't just get promoted. If you wanted a promotion, you had to apply for that and interview for it, whether you were internal or not. And then you still weren't guaranteed to get the job. But with those federal jobs, like for my family members and for my friends, they were able to move up and get those promotions. They were able to start building some type of generational wealth. They were able to put down money on a home. They were able to become homeowners because of those jobs. So there's a lot of people in that area that work for the federal government in one way, shape, form, or another. So those jobs did really help Black people and also Black women. And when Elon Musk came forward and they made this announcement that they were going to cut those federal jobs, I sounded the alarm that was greatly going to impact Black employees the most. And here we are. So when they look to make cuts, who usually goes first? Think about that. Now you got a Black man, you got a Black woman. If it's a choice between the two, it was usually going to be the Black woman that gets cut. Now it goes on to say here, 300,000 Black women forced out. Employment rates have remained somewhat steady for other groups of workers except for us. Between February and April 2025, we lost an estimated of 300,000 jobs, despite the overall U.S. economy adding a reported 175,000 jobs in the same period. Like I said, just because you add jobs doesn't mean that those jobs have been filled. It goes on to say here, we're the face of the most dramatic month-to-month increase in unemployment. Let me just shrink this. I hate that this site is doing this. Sorry about this, guys. Okay. We're the face of the most dramatic month-to-month increase in unemployment across gender and race, skyrocketing from 5.1% to 6.1% in March alone. Luckily, the rate decreased slightly as unemployment for Black women 20 and older fell to 5.8% for the month of June, still significantly higher than the national average. And we aren't the only ones smashing the red button. Economists and experts warn these numbers could signal deeper cracks in the job market. We may be down now, but the real question is, who is next? So, cuts to federal employment. Inequities within the labor market are sure to come for the most vulnerable first, Black women. Not only do we make up the majority of the federal employment roles, We're overrepresented in agencies targeted for budget cuts, including USAID, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the Department of Education, where we account for 28% of the workforce. This is what I was trying to warn people about. Those jobs. Now, they also mentioned DEI too, but like I said, a lot of those DEI positions impacted white women. But listen to the video here where they also break down those numbers.
To the economy now, where staggering numbers have been released surrounding Black women in the labor force. A new report shows more than 300,000 Black women have left the workforce in just the last several months. That's according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Joining me now is gender economist Katika Roy to break this all down and why they're leaving. Katika, thank you so much for being with us. You recently wrote an article where you say that this isn't happening by accident. Why do you think it is happening?
This is happening because of cuts to public sector positions. So if you look at the federal labor force, Black women make up just over 12% of the federal labor force. It's about double their representation in the labor force overall. And when you have targeted cuts up to 50% in organizations such as the Department of Education and HHS, you're not just trimming the fat, you're actually cutting the economic backbone for Black women.
Wow.
Pause here. Did you hear what she just said? Our representation in those federal jobs is double. It was double our percentage. I know. Red 6 says gender economist. I thought about that too. I was like, there's a gender economist like job. Like what? They come up with everything. But yeah, that's what I tried to warn people about.
And so what are some of the spillover effects from all of this?
Well, one of the things that we know is that there is a connection between women's labor force participation and GDP. So just Black women's labor force participation has dropped by just over 2% in the last 3 months. And that has sucked over $37 billion out of US GDP. So this is the economic cost of gender policy ignorance.
This is really fascinating because do you think that most people are unaware of the actual impacts of things like this?
Absolutely. So when we often think about women's issues or Black women's issues, we think of it as an over there problem. It's not. It's an everybody problem. When our economy grows, that has more jobs and more income for everyone. So we know, for instance, overall, that for every 1 percentage point that women leave the labor force, there's a $146 billion hit to GDP.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So this is another thing when you think about the economy. Those women who lost their jobs, guess what they're not going to do? They're not going to be shopping. Because the first thing that goes, and if you talk to anybody that's been laid off, what the first thing you cut back? You're going to cut back on going out to eat. You're going to cut back on retail. You're going to cut back on things that you don't really need. And you're going to focus on the necessities because you just got laid off. And yes, you can file for unemployment, but a lot of times the unemployment isn't going to be exactly what you were making at the job. So you're dealing with the pay cut. So you're going to focus on your bills, right? Like, well, I have to pay my rent. I have to pay my electricity, like those types of things. So that means they are not going to be spending money out there. And that will impact the economy. Similar to when, like you guys saw during the pandemic and a lot of the states that were locked down, yes, that impacted the economy because we weren't spending money out there like that because we weren't going out. So this was the warning that I was sending to people when I said they're going to cut these jobs. I said, guess it's going to impact, right? Now, Professor Richard Wolff mentioned this a long time ago. In fact, the very first time he came on my show, he said how these jobs usually work, that when they look to make cuts, they usually go for the most vulnerable first. And I look back at sometimes and I'm like, when people got laid off and I was like, oh yeah, they fired all them motherfuckers. Like I remember when we had cuts during the pandemic, I was at BU at that time. I remember in my particular department, everybody that got laid off was female. All of them. They didn't lay off any of the men. That's how it usually goes. So it's sad, it's unfortunate. And yes, like that means there's 300,000 Black women looking for employment. Now, imagine that compared to all the other applications that are coming in for people who are looking to switch a job or et cetera or whatever. But talk to people who have been laid off and they can tell you, like, I have friends it's happened to, for whatever reason, when you are laid off, it seems like it's even harder to find a job. Even though you have all this time to look for a job, it seems like nobody wants to really call you in for an interview.
And so we've talked about the consequences, but is there an upside to all of this? Are we seeing women pivoting to entrepreneurship as they're leaving the workforce? What then are they doing?
You know, that's a great question. And the truth is, we don't know where all of the 300,000 Black women that have actually been pushed out of the labor force have gone. We know that some of them have gone into entrepreneurship, which is not only because of luxury, but it's actually because of survival. And this is really a testament to their resilience, but it also shows the rigidity in our traditional employment systems.
Are there any other groups that we are seeing largely impacted in this way in the labor workforce?
Not to this extent. So I track all of the data, as you can imagine, month over month by gender and race and ethnicity. And I started to see this trend about 3 months ago with this really precipitous drop in Black women out of the labor force. And this is a huge hit. And historically, just to give you a sense of the historical context, this is the first time in years that Black women's labor force participation has fallen below Latinas' labor force participation.
Well, there you go. There you go, guys. I am sorry that you are laid off, Infamous. I wish you the best. I'm telling you guys, this has been coming. Now, it's not just them. I do want to explain this as well. Under Biden's presidency, I had a show about Black male unemployment, how that was skyrocketing at one point as well. And I was calling attention to that because I feel like a lot of people just wasn't covering that story at all. And I'm like, yo, nobody's talking about this. Like, what is happening to like Black male unemployment? But here's the data. Here's the data. Check this out. When we're looking at all of it, unemployment rate, Black or African American. So this is men and women combined. If you look over the years, and you will see when we go to 2020, obviously, boom, pandemic, right? That's the big one. That's the big one. 16.8%, which is expected, right? So we all know that. And as you can see, it was going down as we're getting away from the pandemic. It goes down, 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 down. January 2024, 5.3% for all Black workers. And then you can see it starts to come back up here. And July 2025, back up to like it's 7.2%. It's going up. It's not going down anymore. Right. So again, like I said, I would connect that to those federal jobs that were taken away. And when I say what do we want, right? This is another reason why I continue to advocate for worker co-ops. I continue to advocate for like people being able to own a piece of the company. And those federal jobs, they were great that they were able to offer benefits and they helped, some Black families be able to start establishing some type of generational wealth. At the same time, you're still beholden to the federal government. And if anything changes with the federal government, you're gone too. And so I feel like it's all comes back full circle. Like we really have to build more worker cooperatives. We really do have to have something in place for us. Now, many people have said like they can apply for jobs with the state. Good luck. Good luck. I don't know if anybody's ever applied for jobs with the state, but good luck with that one, because it can take a long time to get an interview for those federal jobs. So, and then oftentimes some of those jobs with the state pay way less than what they were making with the federal government. So there's that too. So, but I heavily push and promote worker cooperatives, I think like that is the way to go. This is also why I say unions, I think, are the beginning, but should not be the end game, because we've seen union management turn on the rank and file members as well. So I would say that like we got to push more towards worker cooperatives. But what this goes to show you is that any given moment, it can be snatched from you. And that's the scary part. So we'll continue to follow the story to see how these numbers go, but doesn't look too good. Not right now. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.